Welcome to Special Guest Thursdays, where real voices bring real stories to life. This ain't just an interview. This is a spotlight on those making moves. Different paths, different struggles, different wins. But one thing in common, they showed up and leveled up. We're sitting down with leaders, creators, and game changers to talk pressure, purpose, and the mindset behind the grind. No scripts, no filters, just real. Because every guest brings gems, and every story brings power. This is the Final Boss Podcast, and this is Special Guest Thursdays. Tap in and tune up.
There we go. Welcome to Special Guest Thursdays with your host, the one, the only, the final boss, right? Listen, I got a great show for you tonight. Everyone who is here, thank you for joining us. I see we have the amazing Andre in the building. I have Chakandi is in the building. I have I see Lance is in the building. See Kim is in the building. Thomas 0359 is in the building, right? Derek is in the building. Oh man, we got a full house tonight. Listen, for all of you who are just getting in here, man, thank you. As always, thank you for joining us. Listen, this is the Final Boss Podcast. Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast, right? Special Guest Thursdays, episode number 225, season 4, The Rebirth, arc 3, right? And to each and every single one of you, this is for entertainment purposes only. Entertainment purposes only, right? And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our greeting of the day, right? Now, before we get into tonight's show, I have to let you know, tonight is Special Guest Thursdays, right? And this won't be my last solo Special Guest Thursday. I can almost guarantee it, right? I can almost guarantee it. I'm going to have to change the name from Special Guest Thursdays to non-Special Guest Thursdays, right? Look, man, all of you, look, you've been great. The Sovereign, you've been great. Smarts, warriors, final bosses, motivators, you all have been great. Thank you so much for being so active in the community. All the hashtags, the shares, the likes, and oh, by the way, while you're at it, like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe, right? Before we get ready to get into this episode, man, you know, so many things are happening right now. For the last 2 weeks, both my special guests had family emergencies, man. They had family emergencies. And for me to say, you know, I need to continue to keep rocking on, continue to show, because you guys deserve it. Because I said I will be here 5 times a week, live at 9 p.m., right? So here we are. So let's get into tonight's show. Now, tonight's show, right? We're at the quarter mark of season 4. We're at the quarter mark, 225. We enter the harvest at episode 300, right? We enter the harvest at episode 300, and it would be here before you know it. It would be here before you know it, man. We only have another 3-4 months of content before the next season, and I'm excited about it, man, because we're going to be going from the rebirth into the harvest, right? And I want you to be in alignment with that because the harvest is going to be big. It's about the seeds you plant right now. But tonight, we're going to be talking about something that I've been touching on and building on for the last couple of special guests, right? Tonight, we're going to be talking about the dangerous building you've ever lived in was the one that you didn't design, right? The one you didn't design. So let me ask you a question. Well, let me paint a picture for you. Let me say that, right? Let me paint a picture. Look, you are inside of a building, right? You did not choose to be inside it, right? You were born into this building. You grew up in this building. You got comfortable in this building. You got a job in this building. You got a title in that same building. And because you liked that building, you decorated it. And you spent the better part of your entire life convinced that that building was yours. But here, let me get my handy wand. But here is the question nobody ever asked you. Who drew the plans for that building? Who gave you the blueprint? Not who built it. Not who decorated it. Not who told you what to put in each room of that building. Who drew the actual plans, the blueprint? Who sat at the drafting table, picked up the pencil and decided what the load-bearing walls were going to be in this very building? Who decided how many floors it had? Who decided which windows faced which direction? Who decided what was going to be in the foundation of the building before any of the walls went up, right? Was it you? Was it you? Was it? Was it you? Right? Or was it somebody else? And you just decided to move inside, right? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, right? This is a solo special guest, right? Solo. And is it just me? And you have to ask yourself one of the most uncomfortable questions. And I'm going to ask you this because I have to ask. We have the most difficult conversations here on the Final Boss podcast, right? And I have to ask this because I spent 23 years inside of my building that I didn't design, 23 years inside of a structure that the federal government of the United States drew the plans for. And I was good for a moment in that building. I was excellent in that building. I made rank in that building, right? Earned credentials, got commendations, deployed several times, right? I survived 9/11 up the street from that building, right? At the Pentagon. And then one day I walked out. And when I turned around and looked at it from the outside for the first time in my adult life, I saw something that stopped me cold. I saw that my name was not on that building, right? My name wasn't on it. Not a single page, right? Not a single floor. Somebody else approved the blueprint. Somebody else drew it up. And I've been living inside of it as a result of my whole career without ever asking who signed off on it, right? That is what season 4 is about. That is what the rebirth means when it costs something real. Not redecoration, not renovation, not a fresh coat of paint of somebody else's walls, laying down new carpet, right? Revoking permits, drawing up your own plans for the first time, right? This is episode 225, Special Guest Thursdays, the Final Boss podcast. I am the Final Boss. I'm solo tonight, right? And we're going to go all the way in on this. Every Thursday, we're here at 9 p.m., usually with a special guest, right? Unless it's solo. This is where we bring in voices that expand the conversation, challenge the framework, and push this community into territory we have not even mapped yet, right? And tonight is no different, even though I'm solo. Right? Even though I'm solo. The chair across from me is empty. And that's not a problem. That is a design, right? The universal design. The architect that designed that way. He said, you know what? Tonight you're solo. And I said, okay. Solo it is. Right? Solo it is. So, because the guest you needed for this particular conversation does not live out there, right? It doesn't live out there. The guest lives in the mirror. And the conversation we're about to have require that you sit with yourself inside of it, right? Before we go any further, look, let me talk to who is in the room tonight, right? To my smarts. You guys are the thinkers, the analysts, the people who want to understand the system before they engage with it, right? Thank you for being here. Tonight, the system we are analyzing is the one that is designed for you. So stay sharp, right? This one is going to cut close, right? And to my final bosses, you are the builders, the empire architects, the people with a vision and a deadline. Tonight, I need you to pause the construction for at least 1 hour and ask something more important than what you're building, right? Ask who told you what to build in the first place. The answer changes everything as we move along, right? And to my motivators, you spend energy moving other people around and moving other people forward. I need you to sit still tonight because you cannot lead somebody in a building that you were never designed to live in. And you call that leadership. Shame on you, right? This episode is knowing the difference, right? And lastly, to my warriors, combat tested people, right? Mission driven. You have operated inside structures that other people designed your entire career. Your chain of command, rules of engagement, theater objects, right? You know what it means to execute a plan that nobody else approved. Tonight, we talk about what that means, and what happens when you are finally the one holding the pencil, and how terrifying that blank page actually is. That is who is in the room, right? Now, before we get to work, I got to give you the brass tacks of the evening. I have to give you the brass tacks of the evening. For those who don't know who the brass tacks is the quote that's going to lead us into tonight's conversation, right? And here it is. Right? Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. That was from President Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln, right? Now, most people spend 6 hours swinging a dull blade at a tree that was not even theirs to cut down. And they're exhausted. They're bleeding. And they have nothing to show for it. And the tree is still standing, right? Tonight, we sharpen that axe together. So let's get into it. But before we get into it, I have to establish something before we go anywhere else, right? I have to establish something. Think about this. Every human being alive right now is inside a structure, an invisible architecture that shapes how they think, how they move, and what they believe is possible. They also see what they believe and what they deserve, and how they respond to pressure, how they respond to love, how they handle money, how they handle power, how they handle failure, right? But most people never question the structure. They question the furniture, the aesthetics, right? They rearrange the furniture constantly. The new relationship, same dynamic, right? New job, same conflict. New city, same self. New resolution, same result, right? Different furniture, but the same building. And the building never gets examined because examining the building means admitting that you did not design it, right? You didn't design it, right? Think about that. And that is one of the hardest admissions a grown adult can actually make, right? Because if you didn't design it, then the life you've been living is not fully yours. And that thought is some destabilizing to a lot of people. And most people would rather keep rearranging furniture for the rest of their lives than sit with the truth for 5 minutes. Look, I'm not here for comfort. I'm not here to comfort you, right? I've never been here to comfort you. I'm the final boss, right? This is where we have the most difficult conversations. I'm here to hand you a flashlight and a clipboard and tell you to get to work, right? And we're going to do a walkthrough, right? We're going to do a walkthrough. So here's what a blueprint audit actually looks like in your life, right? Every structure has 4 components. You have a foundation, you have load bearing walls, you have a floor plan, right? And the approver's signature on the final page, right? Let that go. Let us walk through and get through each one of those, right? And while we walk, we're going to talk, right? We're going to walk and talk, right? I want you to do this for your own life in real time as we're walking and talking through this building, right? The foundation is what everything rests on. In a building, it is concrete poured into the ground. In a human life, it is the core beliefs you hold about yourself and the world. What you believe about your worth, what you believe about what you are capable of, what you believe about whether people like you are allowed to have the things you want. Those beliefs were installed before you were old enough to evaluate them. That is the foundation. And most people never inspect it, right? They just build on top of it. And they wonder why nothing holds, right? The load-bearing walls are the structures inside that support everything else, including your value system, your identity, your relationships to authority, right? Your relationship to risk. And those walls are framed up by the earliest experiences. Households that you grew up in, right? The first time you failed publicly and someone responded with shame instead of instruction. I remember that moment for me very clearly, right? The first time you succeeded and either got celebrated or got warned not to get too big for yourself. I remember that moment as well. Your load-bearing walls were framed before you had language for what was happening. That is the structure most people are walking around inside of right now. Foundations, they didn't pour. Walls, they didn't frame. A floor plan, they didn't draw. And nobody ever handed them the blueprint to review. Listen, right? So, who are they? Who are they, right? The people who approved your blueprint. We need to name them, right? Because until we name them and see who signed off on your life's design, we can't revoke the permits. You can't draw new plans. You can't begin the real work of your own foundation. Look, the first approver is your family of origin, right? Not because your family was bad. Most of them were not bad. Most of them were doing the absolute best they could with the blueprint with somebody else handed them, right? Everybody just handing blueprints, right? Handing over blueprints, right? But the beliefs that were in your household about money, authority, and whether you speak up or stay quiet, or whether your ambition is admirable or dangerous, whether rest is earned or lazy, right? Whether you trust people or you protect yourself first. All of that got poured into your foundation before you were even 10 years old. You absorbed it. Children absorb. That's what they do, right? And they're not evaluating the architecture. You're just running away with what they got, what somebody gave them, right? They just living inside it and accepting it as normal and going on the playground, right? And the second approver is your institution. For me, that was the military. For you, it might be the church. It may be a school system, a corporation, profession, an institution that you've belonged to that came with the blueprint already drawn. And here is who we are. This is where we are, right? This is where our value is, right? This is how people operate inside the structure. This is what success looks like inside of the structure. Right? This is what gets you promoted and what gets you eliminated. And if you stay long enough, and most people stay long enough, right? The institutional blueprint became your personal one. You stop knowing the difference between what the institution valued and what you actually valued, right? That is how 23 years goes by, right? The third approver is your trauma, right? Now, we were talking about trauma the other day, right? Trauma is an authorized contractor, unauthorized contractor doing dirty, nasty work, right? It shows up after the original build and starts making structural modifications that nobody approved. It adds walls, right? Where there should be doors. It seals windows that should have light in them, right? It lowers the ceiling in rooms where you used to stand tall in, right? And it does it all without pulling a permit, without your knowledge, without your consent. And it disappears and leaves you living in a modified structure, wondering why certain rooms feel impossible to be in. Now, if that touched you, drop it in the chat, right? Let us know in the chat right now if that touched you, right? And let's talk about the fourth approver. That's the culture, right? That's the ambient noise of the world you grew up in. What was celebrated? What was mocked, right? What held up as an example and what held up as a warning? Right? What kind of person thought you was smart, attractive, successful, dangerous, suspicious, worthy, right? All of that ran in the background like a program you never installed consciously and never knew how to uninstall, right? 4 approvers: family, institution, trauma, and culture. None of them asked your permission. All of them left your signature on your blueprint that was handed down to you, right? Now, let's talk about the moment that I saw my own blueprint. I saw the plans, right? And I want to tell you about that moment, and we're going to turn it around and actually look at my own building, right? We're going to turn around and look at it. So let's start with September 11th, 2001, right? Where I was at the Pentagon working as a fiber optic technician and fiber optic lead, right? When that plane hit, everything changed in 34 seconds. I've talked about that moment before, and I will not sensationalize it, right? That's not what we do here, right? But I keep bringing it up because it's essential to what I'm trying to allow you to discover, right? Through conversation as we walk through these buildings, right? I want to talk about not what happened in those 34 seconds. I want to talk about what I understood 20 years later, when I was fully honest enough to examine it, right? The day something inside me that was permanent, deep, right? A layer of foundation that said, your structure collapsed. Institutions you trusted can burn. I witnessed it. I saw it. The thing you believe was solid can become rubble while you are still inside of it, right? And the only person who's going to pull you out is you, right? That belief built walls inside, right? Not on the outside, inside, right? It made me harder to reach. It made me excellent under pressure and complicated outside of it, right? It made me operate with discipline, and most people cannot match, and made intimacy feel like a liability, right? I could not afford that. That was trauma as a contractor, right? Doing unauthorized work on the foundation without my knowledge. It also drove 23 years of service that I'm proud of. 3 combat deployments, right? Keep saying 2, it's 3, right? Real work, real sacrifice, real results. I'm not discrediting any of it, right? But I also have to be honest about this thing. The motivation underneath a lot of that service was not purely purpose. Some of it was institutional blueprint telling me that the structure was the only one a person like myself could belong inside of and hold dignity, right? Some of it was family origin. I come from a military family. So there was a blueprint that said you earn your place by being indisposable, right? You do not get to stop. You do not get to rest. You perform or you are invisible, right? I didn't write those instructions. That blueprint was handed over to me, right? Full military family. Dad was in the military. I have several uncles that were in the military. My grandfather served in World War II, right? My aunt retired as a full bird colonel, my mom's sister, right? I have an uncle that was in Vietnam, and he served as an engineer. And you know what the engineers did over there, right? And lots more, man. I could go, and this is on paternal and maternal side, right? Both, right? I didn't write those instructions. They were handed to me. They were written before I could write. They were written before I came out the womb, right? And when I redesigned, or let me not go to the redesign first. Let's talk about when I resigned, right? When I resigned, when I physically walked out of the building for the last time, I thought I was making a clean break. I thought the moment of departure was also the moment of liberation. What I did not understand yet was that I could leave the building and still be carrying the blueprint inside of me. The building can be behind you. The blueprint can still be running all of your decisions, right? On your old framework, right? On your old operating system. That is what this arc is really about. The foundation is about pouring new concrete before you pour anything. You have to pull up the old plans. You have to hold them in the light every single page, right? You have to identify every signature and decide one approval at a time what you're keeping and what you're revoking, right? That is not motivation. That is a forensics. That is a forensic look at your own life, right? That's your blueprint. And what's important, you keep, right? And the most important work of this is what you're going to do with it, right? You're going to keep or you're going to revoke, right? So, there's a fundamental difference between a renter and an owner, right? And most people are renters in their own lives without even knowing it, right? A renter maintains the property, keeps it clean, follows the rules, pays on time, but cannot make structural changes without permission, cannot renovate without approval, cannot expand without the landlord signing off on it. The renter is a good steward of something that ultimately does not belong to them. And the renter can be asked to leave at any time, no matter how good a renter they were, no matter how long they paid on time. The building is not theirs, right? A renter in their own life looks just like this. They manage themselves well within the constraints that were set for them, right? They show up on time. They perform inside the expected range, right? They do not question the ceiling because the ceiling was defined before they arrived and they accepted it as fixed architecture feature, right? They're not lazy and they aren't bad people. We're talking about excellent renters here, right? And they would never own the building because ownership requires something the renting mentality cannot produce. It requires you to look at the property and say, I'm going to change this. Not because the landlord said it was time, but because my supervisor approved the plan. Or because my family thinks it's a good idea. Or because the culture validated the move, right? Because I drew the plans and I'm the architect of record and this on this particular property, right? The rebirth is the moment you stop renting, right? But here is what nobody tells you about the transition. When you stop renting, there's no landlord to call when something breaks. That is freedom, and it's terrifying in equal measure. Right? When you're a renter, someone else carries the structural liability. When you become the owner, every crack in the foundation is yours to fix. Every leaking pipe, every room that was never finished, every wall that should have not been there, every window that lacks ceiling, right? Every carpet that lacked padding. You got to replace all of it. You inherit all of it, the good, the bad, and the broken, right? Now, most people say renters because ownership looks like responsibility. They didn't ask for it, right? That's why they say renters. And they're right. It is. That is exactly what it is. Ownership of your own life means owning the work and finding every unauthorized modification. Every unapproved contractor, every signature that got put on your plans without your knowledge, and then doing the honest work of renovating it, right? And renovating from a position of full accountability. No landlord, no approval process, just you, the blueprint, and the truth about what needs to change, right? To my final bosses, listen, hear me clear, right? Listen to this. You cannot build an empire on a rented foundation, right? The landlord will always have authority over the structure, over how you furnish it and beautify, right? You can run an extraordinary operations inside it, but the foundation belongs to whoever approved the original plans. And until you own those plans, you do not own the empire. The first move toward ownership is the audit, right? Is the audit. Now, let me make this practically clear, right? Because I want you to know something. I'm not here to give you a philosophical experience, not all special guests, right? That's for another night. I'm here to give you a tool, something you can use starting tonight when we end this episode, right? We're going to talk about a forensic audit of your blueprint, and it has 3 phases, right? The 3 are identity, trace, and decide, right? Let's talk about identity. Identity, you decide and pick one load-bearing wall in your life, one belief that is holding significant structural weight in how you operate. Something like you need to get some rest, right? You need proper sleep, or right, people with something with people who have real money, and you look at them, you say, oh, they're not like me, right? Or the moment you stop being useful, or you stop being valued, right? Or when the ambition is dangerous because it makes most people uncomfortable. Or, right, you say to yourself, I have to have everything figured out before I can make a move. You need to pick one of those, just one. Now that you picked it, trace it. Where did it come from? Do not guess, right? Don't guess quickly. Think about it. Sit with your answer. Sit with the question, right? And go back and ask yourself, who said this to you? You have to ask yourself that question. Not necessarily in your words, because behavior is language. Who disseminated this belief so consistently in your environment that you absorbed it in a truth before you were old enough to evaluate whether it was true or not? Was it your parent? Was it a coach? Was it a commanding officer or someone? Was it the church? Was it your neighborhood that you grew up in? Was it a relationship that rewrote your understanding of what you were worth? Trace that belief back to its original installation point. That is the approver. That is the signature on that first page, right? Then decide. This is the step that requires the most courage and the most honesty. And the question is not, is this belief true? The question is this: does this belief belong in a new blueprint? Does it serve the version of me that is still being built in season 4? Does it serve the reborn structure? Or is it a remnant of the building that you're no longer living in, showing up as a ghost wall in the new plans, taking up space that something better should occupy, right? Some of what was installed by your approvers is worth keeping, right? And let me be clear about that. Not everything your family poured into you is contaminated. Not everything your institution gave you is corrupt. Some of those walls hold real weight and should stay standing, like the discipline, right? The standard, the sense of obligation to something larger than yourself. And some of that is load bearing and should remain, right? But some of it isn't. Some of it is a wall that made sense in a building you no longer live in. Some of it is a ceiling that is designed to keep you from growing past a certain point, right? And in a new structure, the ceiling has to come down. Like I said in the beginning, identify, trace, decide. That is the audit, right? And that's how you find out whose name is on your plans. And to my smarts, the process is repeatable. Wash, rinse, repeat, right? You do not do this once and declare completion. You run this audit at a standard practice. Every decision you face, every reaction that surprises you, every fear that stops you without rational explanation, run the 3 phases. Find the origin, evaluate the relevance, decide whether it stays with the new plans in the new building, right? Decide. Now, every blueprint has rooms, right? Every blueprint. And most people, by the time they reach a certain age, have sealed off rooms, locked the doors, and they stop going into it, right? Not because the rooms are empty, but because of what is inside of them. Some of those rooms got sealed by the trauma contractor. You had an experience in a room that was too close to process at that time. So you closed the door and you shut it and you locked it, right? You put furniture in front of it and you keep walking by it, right? And over time, the door became a wall in your mind, a wall so complete that you forgot to use it as a room. You just think that part of your structure doesn't even exist anymore, but it's still there. It's still there, right? Sealed rooms are not empty rooms. They are full rooms that you are refusing to enter. The energy required to keep those doors shut is energy that is not available for this building. Every room you refuse to enter is a draft of your strength that runs 24 hours a day, right? Some of the rooms got sealed by the institutional blueprint. The institution did not reward that part of you. The place where you where it's one of those places where your creativity lives, right? The room where your questions live, the space where your real opinions about the direction of things were forming. The institution punished those rooms. It ignored them. It signaled clearly that those rooms were not appropriate for this structure, and you learned to keep them locked, right? You needed the institution to work. And you were willing to give up certain rooms to make that arrangement viable, right? The problem is with that is this. When you leave the institution, the rooms stay locked. The habit of sealing those became so deep, right? That even in freedom, you do not open them, right? Even after you resign, after you're gone, right? Even after you walk away, even after you build your own new building. You are still instinctively sealing rooms that nobody told you to seal anymore. That is the institutional blueprint running in the background of a life that is supposed to be free. For my warriors, this lands in a specific place just for you. Military structure has rooms that are explicitly closed, vulnerability, uncertainty, the admission that you do not have a plan, right? Not in theater, right? Those rooms being sealed keeps people alive. The discipline of sealing them is a mission critical, but you aren't in theater anymore. But those same rooms that protect you in combat can isolate you in the next chapter that you're locked that you're in, right? It's time to unlock them doors. The foundation of the reborn self requires opening those rooms. Not all at once, not without preparation, not recklessly, but deliberately, one room at a time, with the lights on, right? And your clipboard in hand, right? And make sure you got a Sharpie. Because you cannot build a new structure around sealed rooms. The architecture would not be honest. The load calculations would be wrong because you did not account for what was actually behind those walls. It's time to open those rooms, right? And what's in there belongs in the audit. And here's where it gets personal, right? And here's where it gets personal. And I need you to stay with me, right? The most sophisticated version of this problem is not the blueprint that somebody else designed for you, right? That is the one that is visible once you know what to look for, right? Trace the belief, find the approver, done, right? The most sophisticated version of the blueprint you designed is yourself. That is based entirely on a vision and a version of you that no longer exists. So let me get into it. Let me explain, right? Let me explain this part. At some point in your life, you had an experience that was significant enough to make you draw up your own plans. Not the family's plans, not the institution plans, but your own, right? And you made a decision about who you were going to be. You made a vow to yourself. You made a commitment to yourself, right? And you made a line in the sand, right? And you said, don't cross this line. And that decision shaped everything that came after it, right? Maybe it was, I would never be dependent on anybody else again. Maybe it was, I will outwork every room I walk into so nobody else can question my right to be in there. Or maybe it was, I would never let anyone see me struggle because I watched what happened when someone I love let their struggle show. Or maybe it was, I would be the person who holds it together no matter what it costs, right? Those were the plans you drew, right? And they aren't inherited. You signed off on those, right? Your signature is at the bottom of that page, right? And the signature feels different. Every other approval feels different from every other approval because you cannot blame it on anyone else. Those are yours to own, right? But here's the truth behind that, right? You drew those plans at a specific moment in time, under specific circumstances, with the information and emotional resources you had available at the exact moment. The version of you that drew those plans was doing the best they could with what they had. That is not in question. The question is whether those plans are still accurate in the structure you are trying to build right now, right? Because here is what happens. The moment passes, the circumstances change. You grow, you learn, you survive, right? And the things that you survive that were in that original plan that was designed to never be anticipated, right? Drew out a new you, the season for you, the post resignation you, the post deployment you, the post everything that happened you, right? And is it still being governed by plans that a much earlier version of you drew in a moment of crisis or grief or survival or defiance? Are you forging your own signature, right? Are you signing off on a version of yourself that you have already outgrown? The rebirth requires you to sit down with your own old plans and do the same audit you do with everybody else's. Trace the belief. Identify when it was drawn and why, Decide whether it belongs in the new structure, even if your name is already on a page, especially when your name is on the page, right? Look, when you examine those pages in that blueprint, you start looking at permits, right? Revoking a permit is a formal act. It's not casual. It's not emotional. There's no conversation you have once and you consider it settled, right? It's deliberate, documented, intentional, and it changed the legal status of the structure going forward. In your life, revoking a permit looks just like this, right? First thing you need to do is declare what you are revoking. You declare it and you declare it out loud. Declare it right now in the chat, right? Not just in your head, right? Drop it in the chat. Your brain can run the belief in silence indefinitely without registering that you've changed your mind about it, right? A declaration has to be verbal. Oh, not verbal, verbal. I get tongue-tied sometimes. I'm getting ready to get tongue-tied again. Listen, it happens. It has to be specific. Not I'm letting go of my past, but that is decoration language, right? That is furniture rearranging. That is revoking the belief that my worth is determined by my output. And I'm revoking the belief that belonging requires self erasure, right? I'm revoking the approval of the contractor who told me that stillness was weakness, specific, named, and declared, right? And then second, you document the new specification. What is going into the blueprint to replace what you revoked? Because a revoked permit without a replacement specification leaves a structural gap. Nature and construction operate the same way. Vacuums get filled, gaps get closed, right? If you revoke a load-bearing wall belief without specifying what it replaces, the structure will pull something in it and fill it, right? And what it fills and pulls in will not be chosen. It will be whatever is nearby, which is often another version of what you just revoked. And then there's the new specification, right? And that new specification has to be explicit, written, reviewed. It has to be structurally honest. You cannot replace a belief after unworthiness with an affirmation that you do not actually believe, right? That is drywall over a foundation problem. It looks good and it holds nothing. The replacement specification has to be something you are willing to build toward, even when the evidence is not fully there. Somewhat of a directional truth, right? Not a performance. And third, you inspect it regularly. A revoked permit does not mean that the old contractor cannot come back, especially the ones who have been working on your structure for decades. They know all the access points. They know which doors you leave unlocked under pressure. They will come back during stress, especially high stress moments, right? When your nervous system is about to collapse. During exhaustion, during conflict, during uncertainty. They know. And they will start doing unauthorized work all over again. And if you aren't walking the site regularly on a consistent basis, that inspection is not a sign. That revocation failed. It's a standard operating procedure for any serious construction project, right? And to my motivators, this is the place that changes how you lead other people. You can't help someone revoke permits you haven't audited yourself. The most powerful thing you can bring to the people that you lead is testimony of your own walkthrough, right? Not the arrival story, not after the building is complete, but the audit story. The story of sitting with the plans, finding the unauthorized signatures, and beginning the formal process of reclaiming your own signature. The testimony is more valuable than the framework. And after you complete the audit, after the revocation, after you've pulled the old plans from the wall and spread them across the table and gone through every page with a red pen, there's the blank page you come across. And that blank page is one of the most terrifying things a human being can face. That's the hardest thing you can face, right? Because the old plans, even when they were wrong, even when they were drawn by somebody else, even when they were governing a life that was not fully yours, right? At least it told you what to do next, right? You had marching orders, right? The old blueprint had an answer that every situation, every answer that was destructive, every answer was fear, every answer was compliance. It was an answer, full stop. And most of you would choose a destructive answer over no answer almost every single time because the brain does not operate well in architectural uncertainty. The blank page has no instructions, right? There's no family origin telling you which room to build first. The institution behind you, right? The trauma contractor that has been escorted off the property. The cultural noise that's been identified as background and not signal. And you're standing at the drafting table with an empty sheet of paper and full weight of your own freedom pressing down on you like a structure that has not been built yet. That is the moment most people retreat. Not back to the old building necessarily, but retreat. Sometimes they just start drawing some plans again, right? Sometimes they unknowingly, it's the same floor plan in a different style. Same load-bearing beliefs under a different name. Same approvers given new titles in a different life. Because the blank page requires something that none of the approvers ever developed in you. That is the capacity to author yourself, right? Not edit yourself, not improve yourself inside of existing parameters. Author from the blank page with no template, no approval process, no external validation. That design is correct before you even begin, right? And that is what season 4 is. That is the rebirth, right? The rebirth demands at its deepest level, not a renovation, but authorship, right? You sitting at the table holding a pencil and beginning to draw a life from inside out for the very first time. The blank page isn't your enemy. The blank page is the beginning of sovereignty. But you have to be willing to sit at the table long enough to stop waiting for someone to tell you what to draw. Nobody's coming to approve these plans. And that, my friends, is the point of it all, right? That's the point of it all. Now, let me tell you what the new plans need to have in them now that the old ones are missing, right? Let's talk about the first specification. The new blueprint requires a foundation that you actually own, not one you inherited, not one you survived, not the one you were assigned. A foundation built on beliefs that you examined, evaluated, and chosen to install with your eyes open. That, my friends, is slower than just accepting what was handed to you. Slower and less comfortable. It is the only kind of foundation that holds weight under real pressure. And then there's the second specification, right? The new blueprint requires honest load calculations. You have to know what you're actually capable of carrying, not what you were told you should be carrying, not what the institution expected you to carry, right? What you, this version of you right now, can sustain over a period of time without the structure compromising. Look, sovereignty is not about carrying more than anyone else. It is about knowing your real capacity and designing around it truthfully. A building designed beyond its low capacity does not stand taller, and it also falls faster, right? And then the third specification. This is the new blueprint that requires rooms that you actually want to live in, not rooms that impress the neighbors, not rooms that satisfy family, right, and their expectations, not rooms that qualify you in the eyes of an institution that you probably left, but rooms you actually can inhabit, where you can sit back and see the real work happening, right? Where the real version of you is comfortable being present. If this sounds obvious, it's not, right? Most people have never asked themselves what rooms they actually want to live in their life. They've only been evaluated in the rooms against those that have external approval. And this fourth specification, the new blueprint has to be signed, right? Not out of fear, not out of trauma, not out of momentum of everything that came before, not the pressure of what other people need you to be, not the comfort of having a structure that somebody else designed so that you can blame somebody else if it fails. But you, right? You, the architect of record for this, the structure is you. That means when something happens, something goes wrong, you need to fix it. When it needs to expand, you draw the expansion. When a wall has to come down for you to renovate, you do that yourself. And you have full accountability of every load-bearing decision in your life from that point forward. That is not burden. That is not promotion. I'm sorry, that is promotion, right? From chess piece to chess master. That move is the move. And the move starts at the drafting table, right? Now, I need to talk to someone specific in the room, right? Someone specific. And I'm talking to the one who's known for a while that their blueprint is wrong. The one who's done enough reading, enough searching, enough late night conversations with themselves to know that the building that they're living in was not designed for them. The one who feels the misalignment in their body every morning when they go through the motions of life, that someone else's vision of who they should be, right? That person is in the room tonight. Maybe that person is you, right? And that person keeps stalling the audit, right? Not because they're lazy, right? They stall or are stalling isn't laziness. That's grief, right? Because the moment you pull the old plans from the wall and go through them with an honest eye, you have to confront the cost of the years spent inside the wrong structure. You have to look at the time, the decade, 2 or 3 decades sometimes, right? The relationships you conform to with the wrong blueprint. The decisions that made sense inside the wrong structure and cost you everything from outside it. The version of you that never got to live because the building was designed too small for you because of who you actually are, right? A lot of you are too big for that building, right? That grief is real. And I'm not going to minimize it, right? I'm going to tell you something about it, right? The grief is not a reason to keep living in the wrong building. The grief is evidence that the grief is what the wrong building cost you, right? Think about that. That's a verdict on your past. That's an invoice, right? Look at what it's cost. Look at what you spent. And now the question is, are you going to be honest about the cost? And are you going to do the work of building something new, something true? Or are you going to let the grief become a new occupant of the wrong building, taking up the room where the audit was supposed to happen? The audit does not require you to stop grieving. It requires you to grieve honestly enough to see the plans clearly. And then you begin, right? Not when you feel ready, not when the circumstances align, not when you've processed everything and achieved clarity on all of it. You begin before you are ready. An act of beginning is what produces the readiness. That is the only sequence that has ever worked. And to my warriors, specifically to you guys, right? You know what the move is under conditions that are not ideal. You know how to move in that. You know what it is to execute in the dark, in the fog, all right? With incomplete information about the mission that you got completed anyway. Apply that training to the most important mission you have ever been assigned. Design the life that is actually yours. Move now. The readiness comes from the movement, right? Give me a couple more minutes. I'll be done shortly. All right. And here's what this week looks like across the network if you want to work with the full architecture. Starting tomorrow, right? Starting tomorrow, Friday. The week ends, right? Use Friday to start the identity phase of your audit. Pick one belief, one load-bearing wall, right? Write it down. Don't analyze it yet. Just identify it, right? And sit with it over the weekend. Let it exist on paper, right? Let it materialize with you mentally, right? Let it be real, right? Let it start building a new foundation, right? Then Sunday night on sitting down, right, at 9 p.m. live, that's when the chair gets used differently. And that's when you have to spend the next week doing honest work, doing honest walkthrough, right, of the work. You come in on Sunday's episode having identified the belief, right? We'll be talking about what happens when you're willing to examine the quiet space between who you were and who you're becoming. That conversation lands completely differently when you're already in the mid-audit, right? And then Monday night, right? Monday night, Motivation Mondays at 9 p.m. live, the architecture of the rebirth mind or the reborn mind, right? First principalities and first principles of the rebuilt identity. If you did the identity and trace work this weekend, Monday becomes a different kind of episode for you, right? You are not just listening to motivation. You're installing a new specification into a structure you've been examining, right? You've been doing a walkthrough. And then on Tuesday, right? Tuesday with Tech Tuesdays, with the sensei, right? That's my buddy, right? At 9 p.m. live, Arc 3 continues. The sovereign tech stack, right? And you need tech. The tools that serve the new structure, the intelligence layer of the blueprint, because the new building is not analog, right? We're going full fiber optics, right? The reborn operator needs a tech architecture that matches the new plans. And I sit down with the sensei to have that conversation, right? And then Wednesdays, right? Wednesdays are special. That's my day, right? That's Merger Wednesdays, 9 p.m. live, where we have the doctoral level conversation, right? We talk about the deep architecture. We talk about the intersection of consciousness and technology, right? Week after week, Merger Wednesdays is building the theoretical framework underneath everything else we do in this network, right? In the Find a Boss network, the Find a Boss community, Find a Boss family, right? You do not have, or I should say, you have not been consistent with, if you haven't been consistent with, I couldn't get that out. If you haven't been consistent with Merger Wednesdays, Arc 3, now is the time to fix it, right? And then go back, right? Come back here on Thursdays, right? Same chair, same time, maybe solo, maybe not, right? And whoever's in the chair next week, we're going to build with them, right? 5 shows, 1 arc. One question running through all of it right now is who plans are you living by, right? Get the answer before Arc 4 starts, because Arc 4 is the construction. And if you cannot build with the integrity on the foundation you've never audited, you need to start doing a walkthrough. You need to start the audit this week, right? You need to start the audit this week. Right. Let me land this clearly, right? Let me land this clearly. You're inside of a building. That is the reality. You were born into the structure. That's also the reality. You were shaped by the structure. More reality, right? You've been operating inside the structure your entire life. Man, these realities are getting tough, right? But that's not the problem. And that's never been the problem. The problem of the building you were inside right now was not approved by the people who do not consult you, right? Who could not have consulted you? They couldn't, right? Because they built it before you were old enough to even understand it, even before you had an opinion, right? And you've been living inside of it, rearranging the furniture, repainting the walls, laying down the foundation, laying down the carpet, right? Changing the address from time to time, but never pulling up to the original plans and asking the most important question a reborn person can ask, right? You have to ask yourself, is my name on the blueprint? Or am I just a committed tenant, right? The rebirth is not a season theme. It is not, it is a forensic event, right? It is the moment you stop renting, stop decorating, stop managing, right? Somebody else's structure as if it was yours. And you sit down at the table and begin the work of authorizing yourself from the ground up, right? The work is not comfortable, right? It's not fast. It doesn't have a ribbon cutting ceremony. There's no champagne to pop at the end, right? Or at the beginning. The ribbon gets cut at episode 300 when we start the harvest, right? Everything between here and there is the build. The foundation is being laid right now. What you pour in the arc determines everything that goes up and the arcs that follow. Don't pour on unchecked ground. Pour the plans, you find the signatures, you make your decisions, you draw your own plans, right? And to my smarts, the most intelligent thing you can do right now is audit what you've been accepting as intellectual truth about yourself. Some of those beliefs were installed by people who needed you to believe them. Evaluate the source before you keep building on the conclusion. And to my final bosses, the empire starters, right? That starts with your blueprint, not the funding, not the team, not the market opportunity, the internal instruction, and architecture of the person doing the building. Get your plans right before you break ground on the next phase, right? And to my motivators, stop trying to inspire people who's into buildings they were never designed to live in. The most powerful thing you can do for someone is help them find the plans of their own building, their own life, and help them read them, right? Honestly, maybe use Chat GPT or something to help them read, right? And that's real leadership, right? And to my warriors, you have executed inside structures other people designed for your entire career. You are exceptional at that very thing, right? Now, the mission is different. You are the commanding officer of your own life. You're the CEO, right? It's time to draw the objective. It's trying to approve the plan. It's time to execute with the same standard that you've always had, right? You sign the orders, right? You sign it. Listen, I am the final boss. I am here. We are here, right? This is episode number 225, special guest Thursdays, right? Season 4, the rebirth, arc 3, the foundation. Another solo night. No co-signer needed for this one, right? 75 episodes to go into the harvest at episode 300. Pull the plans. Get ready to get on the fired up train. Find every signature that's not yours and start drawing. Same chair, same time next Thursday. See you guys again at 9 p.m. live next Thursday, right? Smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors. You guys have an amazing night. I will see you again. I'll see you again on Sunday or Sitting Down Sundays, right? Sitting Down Sundays. And as always, right? Let's get the train back in there again. Let's get the train back. There's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's even heavier pain that comes with regret, right? Remember that. And if this resonated with you, go share it. Don't gatekeep, right? Share it with at least 3 people. And as always, if I don't see you, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show for this evening, man. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you guys, man. Drop in the chat if you're enjoying this. Drop it in the chat if you're enjoying this, man. I'm enjoying it, right? I think really that's all that matters. It's because I'm enjoying it. But I do appreciate you, and I want you to enjoy it too. Oh, by the way, go get Go Time if you haven't. Go Time, all aboard the Fired Up train, Amazon bestseller. Go pick it up if you haven't. Go Time 2 is on its way. Go Time 2, baby. It's on its way in a few months. It'll be here in July. Go Time 2. Look out for it, right? Look out for it. And that is our show. Y'all have an amazing evening and a wonderful good night.
They thought it was over. They thought the fire burned out. But fire doesn't destroy the chosen. It forges them. Hosted by Turbo, the CEO. New energy, new strategy. Every setback builds strength. Every loss builds strategy. And every leader rises again. The rebirth begins. Season 4. Bigger conversations. Real strategy. Power moves only. Monday motivation. Tech Tuesday. Merger Wednesday. Special guest Thursdays, sit down Sundays. Season 4 starts now. Tap in or get left behind, because bosses don't wait, they lead.